What's going on, everybody? My name's Nick.
And I'm Joe.
And we're Nick and Joe. Welcome back to the K-Drama Club. We have just finished watching episode 4 of Startup and preparing for the weekend to eventually watch episodes 5 and 6. So that said, before we get into our thoughts on episode 4, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and you go back and watch previous episodes if you haven't. If you're enjoying the show, we're sharing our thoughts episode by episode, kind of recapping and then going over what we think is going to happen and what we might hope happen in our overall review of the show. Let's get into our thoughts about episode 5.
All right. I got my bulleted list.
Yes, you've been very diligent, so
Okay.
I'll follow your lead.
All right.
Episode opens with like what's gonna happen in the episode. Like
Yeah.
it opens with the choice where
Dosan
has to choose between In-jae and Taomi. And we're like, why does he have to choose between them? What's going on?
Yeah.
And little did we know, throughout the whole episode, we'll find out why.
It sets it up. In-jae left the company that she was working at, which happened in the previous episode, in
She
episode
said,
3.
F you, Dad.
Yeah, and she's gonna leave. It kind of shows the beginnings of that. She sets up in her mother's hotel room.
Yes.
Because they said in a previous episode that her mother lives in a hotel room.
Because she cannot stand the father.
Cannot stand the father, so lives in a hotel room. She sets up like a little business area, and then we find out that some members...
A pretty big hotel room.
Pretty big hotel room.
A fancy
I call it a suite.
It pretty much has an office in it anyway.
Some people from her previous company also resigned and went to work with her.
Yeah.
And I think the one important thing that happened there is she has this conversation with her mother. And her mother's like, "What are you doing? Like, come talk to me for a minute." And like they pulls her aside and says like, "I'm worried about you. Like, why are you entering Sandbox? Like, why are you doing all this stuff? Like, you have connections, you have money, you don't need to do all this. I'm really worried about you." And In-jae was kind of like, when you talk to Taomi, you were like, "Oh, I'm rooting for you." But then when you talk to me, you say, "Oh, I'm worried about you."
Transformative moment.
Yeah, and she's like, if you're going to support one of us, support both of us.
And you can tell that it's almost like this complex, like In-jae has, and she's feeling the insecurity of like, oh, I could only be successful with this financial backing of like my rich stepfather. And now she has like a chip on her shoulder and a grudge, and she wants to prove to the world like, I can do this. So when the mom was like, it's almost like the mom sees the father in Taomi, in like his like startup entrepreneurial nature, so she was rooting for her. But with In-jae, she's never seen her work like that.
She sees her second husband's qualities, so she does not show her the same sort of like appreciation.
Right.
And that you could tell that it actually changed because like later in the episode, the mother like just brings coffee quietly into the room and like drops it for all the people working on her new startup.
It's like, okay, I'll support.
Yeah, so she starts to be supportive, and then later in the episode when they're doing the whole Sandbox thing, she's like watching it live on her phone to like see how she's doing. So I think that was an important development in like that relationship, because it seems like there's going to be like this kind of storyline of both of them kind of repairing their relationship with their mother, maybe, because you can see it happening with both daughters already. Next important thing that happens is this bookstore commotion.
Oh my God. Yes.
So many things happening in the bookstore.
Overarching of this episode, I think this episode has been the funniest one so far.
Yeah,
like
definitely.
the most comical things happen in this episode.
Yeah. Everybody's going to the bookstore to try to get this one book they
Everybody
need for this
needs
Sandbox.
the Sandbox book.
The Sandbox book.
I can't think of like what is the real life version of this. Like if Mark Zuckerberg wrote a book or something, and you were going to like
a conference where
Facebook conference or something,
I
guess.
a competition. And
but apparently this book is a hot commodity.
Yeah, it's a SAT prep book.
Basically, yeah.
Taomi meets like this girl who's like a lawyer, but is applying to get into Sandbox because she doesn't want to be a lawyer anymore and she wants to like do something else.
And what do you know? They both grab what they think is the last book.
Well, Taomi offers her like a certain amount of money, and the girl's like, "Oh, I'll give you this much." So Taomi like takes the money and then walks in and just grabs another book.
Yes, because little did we know there were more books getting wheeled out.
So the girl's like, that crook, she like scammed her. And then Dosan and his friends also need that book.
Yes.
So
and they're a bunch of suckers.
So the girl who Taomi scammed just scams them back for even more money.
Yes.
Says, "Oh, this is the last one."
It's a really funny chain.
Yeah, it was a good little series of events.
Yeah.
But then, so I just think that person, that character, is gonna come into play at some point. I think even she didn't really have much to do in this episode. You see her a little bit later at the Sandbox thing, but she's definitely gonna be like a character in the show. I don't know if she's gonna be like part of their Sandbox team, like part of their business, or maybe part of In-jae's business.
Yeah.
Like I think somewhere in there she's gonna fit in and be like one of the main characters in the show.
Yeah.
But then Talmi and Dosan then run into each other at the bookstore.
And he's just looking like a kid who's running this little startup, not like the rich guy that he's supposed to be pretending to be.
She still thinks that he's like this rich guy, and it's really funny. They both like drop below the shelf, and like she like fixes their hair really quick, and he like switches his shoes. And
she wants to look pretty for him, and he wants to look rich to keep the lie up.
Yeah. So they run into each other, and then what ends up happening is like they're having a conversation, and she says, "Oh, are you doing anything tomorrow?" And he's like, "No." And she's like, "Oh, it's your birthday."
She knows all these details about him.
Because it's actually Chi Pyong's birthday the next day, because he was the one writing the letters. And she's like, "Do you remember your wish?" And he was like, "Oh, yeah, of course I remember my wish."
I remember my wish,
and she's like, "I want to make your wish come true tomorrow." She goes to go home, but he ends up getting on the bus with her, and they hold hands.
They hold hands.
They hold hands.
And she's the one who uses like the pickup line. Like she goes, "Oh, like let me see your hand," like to see like how big it is, whatever. She puts her hand in his
right
hand.
In there,
The classic.
The classic. Absolute classic.
And she talks about how she likes his hand, which is important.
Yeah, it comes into play later. Then she goes home and gets prepared for this whole birthday exchange. And I think this is one of the funnier things in the episode too. She's like tells her grandmother she needs a blanket.
Yes, I forgot about that
for the birthday.
And she's like, my mind is going.
She's like, what do you need a blanket for?
Yeah,
like freaking out. And she's, but it's just to play like.
Just sit on the floor and
play
cards.
Floor and play like this like game that families play on holidays.
And Grandma was very relieved to hear that.
But
what's the name of the game? Go.
Oh, it's Go Stop.
Go Stop.
Go Stop.
Classic game of Go Stop.
Of course. But I think this whole birthday scene was one of the more important ones in the episode, because so initially Chi Pyong thinks they're gonna go on like some crazy date, so he's trying to teach Dosan like all this stuff about dating and like this is the salad fork, this is the dessert fork, like all this stuff that obviously Tommy would not care about.
Yes.
But he's like, haven't you ever dated before? Like how to sniff your wine, right?
Yes, he's like sniffing the wine scene is very funny.
Yeah.
And then he also turns to the other two guys and goes, "You guys haven't dated either?" And they're like, "Not by choice."
Yeah.
Is that when they talk about the
knitting club?
Yes.
Yeah, the knitting club thing is
they
funny.
like, we even started this knitting club, which like I think it's funny that they bring this up again, because we saw Dosan knitting on the bus or on the train
randomly,
and we're like, that's kind of like cool, whatever, like odd detail, and then they bring it back to like, and not only do they bring it back and tell this story about how they started this knitting club to meet girls, but it's narrated by that one friend, the guy, I forget his name.
Yeah, I think it's Chusan or something like that.
Yeah, so he narrates it, and like we're flashing back to the knitting club. He's doing all the voices and stuff. I thought that was the fun, and he's also directly like looking at the camera.
Yeah,
I thought that was.
And he's like doing all the girls' voices.
Yes,
it's pretty good. But that's actually, they say that's how they met Dosan, because they started that knitting club, and they showed up because he actually wanted to knit.
They did it to attract girls, and then this guy shows up
because he wants to knit with them. So they're teaching them all this stuff on dates, and then he goes to pick up. Dosan goes to pick up Tommy for the date, and she's like, "Oh, just bring me to your office and invite all your friends." So they have to like bring all the stuff back to the office, reset everything up like it's like in the fake office at Chi Pyong's.
It's his apartment, right?
Yeah.
So they have to schlep all the stuff there, set up the office, pretend it's their place.
Yeah, do like all that stuff. And then it's just to play Go Stop, because when Chi Pyong was writing the letters, obviously he didn't have a family, he was an orphan and everything, so he saw on the TV like a family like playing this game at like a holiday, and like that's something that he never experienced.
Right.
So that was like what he wrote as his dream, like his wish. So she was making that come true, but Chi Pyong was actually there. So like she thinks she's doing this thing for Dosan, and him and all his friends are just playing, but this is actually seeming like, to me, like it seemed like a really meaningful moment for Chi Pyong. Like it's something that like he was like getting super into it, because it was actually something that he had wanted.
And I think what you were saying last episode might be coming true with him having a crush on Tommy, and it's gonna be a love triangle, even though I don't think it was. But I think in this moment of like the birthday scene, it became that because he was seeing that, because he was doing. I mean, this comes back to the hand thing.
Yeah.
But the things that Tommy is in love with
about Dosan
are all things about Chi Pyong in real life, except for the hand.
Yeah.
So we see him looking down at his hand a bunch more times in this episode, because he's growing more and more attracted to Tommy, even though everything's based on a lie. But the one thing that's not a lie is when she said, "I like your hand."
Yeah. Because like later, after this whole birthday scene, like he brings her home and he's like, "Tell me what you like about me." She says like she lists off things that she likes, and they're all from the letters.
Yeah.
And and in his head he says, "Not me. That's not me."
Right.
And then he asks her, he's like, "What's one more thing?" And she goes, "I like your big hands." And then he like looks down at his hand because that's the one thing that she said out of all the things that was like truly about him.
Right. And that's going to get worse and worse as this. I had to keep reminding myself during this episode that not everybody's kind of like lying to each other.
Yeah.
Like I had to remember like who knows what about who because we know everything about everybody.
Yeah. But I think that it's not even going to be a love triangle because I think that sooner rather than later, Tommy's going to find out
Course.
about Dosan, that he's not the one that really wrote the letters, and she's going to find out that it was Chi-pyong, and then it's going to be like this one-way thing where Dosan loves Tommy loves Chi-pyong, and Chi-pyong is like, does have feelings for Tommy, but he's not going to like go for it because of some weird...
Maybe he doesn't want to mess up the business because we're going to get to that.
Yeah, and then and also like maybe his relationship with their grandmother, he feels some sort of like weirdness about it, that kind of thing. I think in every K-drama I've watched, there's two characters destined to be together. And I think those
they're destined to be together?
I think it's Chi-pyong and Tommy are the two that are, when we're coming down the line, those are the ones we're going to be rooting for.
From the hot dog stand to Sandbox.
And then who's In-jae gonna end up with, bro?
That's a good question.
Yeah, it's gonna be Dosan, bro.
I think maybe, but I think her growth is gonna be mostly around being an independent person and being nice to people.
Yeah, that could be true.
Are we back at Sandbox now?
I think the one more thing is after Dosan comes back from Tommy saying like, oh, these are the reasons I like you, and then she says his hands, he realizes that like the things that she likes aren't about him. And he goes back to Chi-pyong's, and Chi-pyong tries to give him a bunch of clothes, and he gives them all back. And he says, I don't want this. He's like, I don't want you to like, I don't want to pretend that I'm this person. I want you to make me this person. He's like, tell me what to do, and I'll do it. And Chi-pyong says, well, is it anything? And he was like, yes. And he says, when you get to Sandbox, recruit a CEO. And then Dosan says, are you saying that I'll never be a good CEO? And Chi-pyong says, yeah, I'm saying that you'll never be a good CEO.
Which is not that like hard of a lesson. I mean, like he created this tech and stuff.
He's not a businessman.
He's not a businessman. He's not a strategist. He like made the thing. So I don't think that's too tough advice. But they did have a good moment as well. A moment I didn't really understand while we were watching it. I had to ask you while we were watching it.
Yeah.
Where they came to this understanding, or like Chi-pyong came to this understanding of Dosan. Can you explain it a little bit? Because I'm still a little like vague on it. Like, I don't think Chi-pyong thought that Dosan took his business very seriously and like cared about like what he was doing, and that's why there was that whole tension around like him investing, and he didn't want to invest in a failing company, but he was like, oh, you actually care about the company? You'll do anything to like make your company successful? And it was like a switch. Yeah,
there's two parts to this, I think. There's the one part where they're meeting with investors, the venture capital people.
Oh, yeah.
And they're coming in, and then eventually they're meeting with one, and these people are getting super excited about their technology.
Yeah, because they're trying to steal it.
Yeah, and then Chi-pyong comes in and like slams a laptop shut, and he's like, are you guys like stupid or you're naive? Like these are programmers, they're not like investors. Yeah. So he like kicks them out, and then they're kind of like, why are you so hard on us? And he's like, these people say they love the car because they're not going to ride in it. I'm thinking about buying the car. So I want to know that the lining's good, the tires are good. Like I'm checking out every single thing, which I think is a really good analogy for what he's trying to say. So he is interested in the business. Yeah. I think Chi-pyong has this thought that Dosan is interested in Talmi, and that's why he's doing all this fake stuff, because he has like a little crush on her.
Right.
And that comes with him seeing them together that night, sitting on the bench and stuff. Like he thinks like, oh, this kid has a crush on her, so he'll just go along with it. But his friends make it seem like, oh, Dosan's not even into girls. Like, he doesn't want anything to do with this. He's just doing this because he wants his business to be successful, and he wants like you to help, whatever. So he's like, oh, I didn't realize that
you want to be successful.
You want to be successful. I thought you were just doing this to get this girl.
Basically, I thought you were just some stupid kid.
Yeah. So when that happened, that's when he started like buying him the clothes, and like he's like, okay, I will. Like, if you're only doing this for me, just tell me what you need, and I'll help you.
Right.
Because he thought that there was like an ulterior motive there.
Yeah, that was pretty transformative for their relationship. And that brings us back to when he tells him, you got to find a new CEO when you go to Sandbox. And what do you know? They end up in this like game at Sandbox. So everybody's at Sandbox now, because all the residents, I think
everyone's either at Sandbox or watching it live on TV.
Yeah, exactly.
Every character in the whole show.
Yes. So they're there, and one of the first they sort out from the whole group of residents like who's going to be the CEOs, and they pick 40 out of like 400 from this like phone game, which I still don't really understand.
Yeah, it's just kind of like it was a word association game pretty much.
And what do you know? Talmi and In-jae both end up being CEOs. They get one of the 40. And then the challenge is people running the company need to go find CEOs. The CEOs need to go find like the company or the idea that
put
they're
together
run.
a team.
Yeah.
To do their the Sandbox competition with.
And therein lies the choice.
Yeah. So.
But this is all also unraveling the lies too.
Yeah.
Because now Dosan is at Startup. But he's at Sandbox, but he's supposed to be a fancy business owner that's already done A series, like fundraising and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But he has not, and that all comes to a head.
So In-jae and Tommy both are CEOs, and then they end up on stage, they look at each other, and Tommy's like, I wonder what my hotshot sister is doing here at this startup thing. And then her sister goes, I wonder what your hotshot boyfriend is doing here, and like points him out in the crowd.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, and then so that's when it kind of all unravels. And they have this conversation. He's like, I didn't mean to deceive you. Like, I'm sorry. Well, like, you know, they think that it's over. Like the three Samsan guys, they're like, oh, well, it's all over now. And then Tommy's like, will you recruit me as the CEO of Samsan? In-jae's like, oh, I'd like to make a similar offer. I need programmers, so I'd like to recruit you guys to come be my programmers.
And the big conflict is In-jae has all this experience running a company already. She's the clear, correct answer, quote unquote. Yeah. Tommy, of course, has no experience, but is probably going to be very successful eventually. And then they have to have that conversation about like who are they going to pick. And the thing that Dosan says is listen to how they said it, right? Yeah. Tommy said, will you recruit me as your CEO? And then In-jae basically like flips it the other way. Like I want
you guys to be my programmers.
Yeah,
I want to
you'll be mine versus well, can I be yours?
Yeah, and that's kind of how they make the decision. It's like they want to still have control over their own company, so they decide to go with Tommy.
Which is funny because on their first like fake date when they were pretending to be boyfriend and girlfriend, and they see In-jae for the first time. Dosan says, oh, I'm recruiting her to be my CEO.
Yeah.
And that came true.
It all came full circle. Yeah, I mean, I thought this was a really good episode, actually. It was good. I think it was a nice step up from the previous episode as far as like how everything progressed and like the pace of it.
Yeah. One thing I'm calibrating is that this is a much more lighthearted, kind of funny show. With the beginning episodes, like it gets very heavy with like the father dying and stuff. So I was kind of prepared for a little more drama and like depth and seriousness, but it really is like leaning into the comedy, like lighthearted spirit. So like now that I'm kind of like calibrated for that, I think I'm excited for future episodes.
Yeah. I think that this whole lie with Dosan comes crashing down this weekend.
You think so?
Episode 5 and 6.
All right.
I think that she finds out that he didn't write the letters.
It's just unraveling.
Yeah, unravels really quickly. It needs for some tension in these episodes, I think.
For sure. Especially now that they're going to be working together in a company. They're going to be spending lots of time together. Yeah. He's going to fall more in love. It's going to be a whole mess.
Yep. I'm excited to see it.
Yeah, I'm excited. If you have thoughts about this episode, favorite moments, favorite characters, predictions, whatever it may be, please feel free to leave a comment down below. Give this video a like if you enjoy it because it really helps us out. Subscribe to the channel for more stuff about K-dramas, or for more episodes of K-Drama Club. We're doing Startup, but who knows where we'll go once Startup is done and over. We've done some K-pop content with Blackpink, and we're obviously looking for suggestions, so leave those in the comments down below what you're interested in seeing from us on the channel. But anyway, for now, my name's Nick.
And I'm Joe.
And we're Nick and Joe.
And Joe.
And Joe.
Done.